One of the things I write about very openly is, I call it the 2007 breakdown / spiritual awakening. And
at that red kitchen table.
At that red kitchen table where it all started. And then I took my syllabus to my therapist and said, I need more vulnerability. I have 6 weeks, go. I think the part that really pushed me kind of to getting help and wanting to live differently was what I was seeing about parenting. That this whole idea that who we are and how we engage with the world is such a far more accurate predictor of how our children will do than what we know about parenting.
Right.
And I'll start by saying I agree with you. I think we're in a gentle, quiet awakening period right now.
Yeah.
But I started my research just very coincidentally 6 months before 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And so over the course of the last 12 years, I have seen fear absolutely run roughshod over our families.
Yeah.
And I have seen us go to these crazy lengths to protect ourselves and our children from the uncertainty that the world has become. And I've not only seen that through my lens as a researcher, but certainly experienced it as a parent, but as a college professor.
Mm-hmm.
This is my 15th year teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I only teach master's and doctoral level students, but I see students come to us who have never had real experiences with adversity.
Yeah.
And how that shows up is hopelessness. One of the most interesting things I've found in doing this work is, something the wholehearted share in common is this real profound sense of hopefulness. Mm. And as I got into the literature on hope, very specifically C.R. Schneider's work from the University of Kansas at Lawrence, that hope is a function of struggle.
Right. I think that's one of the most stunning sentences that I saw in your writing.
Yeah, and that hope is not an emotion, but hope is a cognitive behavioral process that we learn when we experience adversity, when we have relationships that are trustworthy, when people have faith in our ability to get out of a jam.
Right, which is different from this pattern of having faith in us, which means telling us everything we do is wonderful and shielding us from pain. As long as they can.
Right. And, I'm literally I don't even know how to talk about it. It floors me that when I go out and I do a lot of talks for big corporations, Fortune 100 companies, and how many people tell me, like the HR folks who I end up, luckily I love them and I get to talk to them a lot, who will tell me how often parents call to go over the performance evaluation of their children. Mm. Or to find out why they didn't get a raise or a promotion.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I just took my daughter to college, and we got this lecture, the parents and the families who were there, from like the dean of students, and it was so clear that they were dealing with that same thing, right? I mean, he basically said, I need you to understand that we're going to take great care of your gem, and also that my relationship is to them and not to you. And we got this lecture, which was clearly based on parents still trying to control. And, again, it's like, boy, we know this, don't we? This desire that you have to create a beautiful world and life and experience for these people you love.
But you know what? I think we lose sight of the beauty, the most beautiful things I look back on in my life are coming out from underneath things I didn't know I could get out from underneath.
Yeah.
The moments I look back in my life and think, God, those are the moments that made me, were moments of struggle.
Yeah, or I look back at things I did where if my parents or I had understood how crazy it was, like if it had been me, I would have tried to intervene and rescue.
Oh, for sure.
And you're right. Those are the moments you become who you are.
And I've seen how this research has really changed, like I'll give you just a very specific example. My daughter decides, that she wants to try out for something that she's really new at. She's a sport or something that she's just taken up. And I think before, maybe even 3 years ago, before this research, not only before I wrote it up, before I started trying to practice it and live it, I think I would have been the parent who said, either let's get you in 34 camps before you try out so you've mastered it, or I don't think you should try out for that. Because there are girls who've been playing this sport as long as you've been playing soccer.
And you want to shield them from disappointment.
Right. And I want to take away that moment that I had.
Right.
And it wasn't the moment. When I think back, and I talk to parents a lot about this, it wasn't the hard moments that we don't want to expose them to. It was the isolation and shame we felt around those moments because a lot of us didn't have people to process them with. Like, I think when I went out for something and didn't make it, I don't think my parents were ashamed of me, but I think they were ashamed for me. I don't think they knew how to talk about that. I don't think we had a conversation. I know we didn't have a conversation that I can have with my daughter today where I say, you know what? I'm so proud of you, not only for trying, but for letting the people around you who you care about, let us know how much you wanted it.
Right.
And it doesn't get braver than that.
Right. Well, I mean, here's this other sentence that's a corollary to the sentence, hope is a function of struggle. When you say you look at a baby, your newborn baby is hardwired for struggle. It's built in us that's what we're going to encounter. That's how we're going to shape ourselves. That's actually a really hard thing to take in, as a parent, especially thinking about those moments early on when you first meet this being that is going to have dominance over your life.
Yeah, because I think we look and think, I can make this right.
Yeah.
I can do for her or him what wasn't done for me. I can protect them from the things that hurt me.
Yeah.
I think we are so much more hardwired for who we are than what people, especially parents, want to believe.
Yeah.
And I don't think our job as parents is to make everything right and perfect and beautiful and true. I think our job is, during struggle, to look at our kids and say, yeah, this is hard and this is tough and you're hurt.
And you're not alone. You're not alone.
But you're not alone.
I'm not going to fix it, but you're not alone.
Right. You're not alone. And I want to make sure you...
Precisely at a moment in which Americans, I think after a few generations of pretending like collectively we weren't that vulnerable at least, have rediscovered, right, geopolitical vulnerability, economic vulnerability. So I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of how that manifests itself in our civic life. I mean, you have this really great sentence, feeling vulnerable, imperfect, and afraid is human. It's when we lose our capacity to hold space for these struggles that we become dangerous. And it seemed to me, that's one way to describe what is happening in our culture and our political life. We have no space to be honest about that, to be vulnerable, to be imperfect and afraid together. And it's become dangerous.
No, we don't, on a micro level as individuals, we're not our best selves in fear. And collectively, we're certainly not our best selves when we're in fear. And the national conversation, and I think this is true politically, I think it's true socially, economically, I think in the sector where we talk about religion and spirituality, the conversation has really centered on what are we supposed to be afraid of and who's to blame for it.
Right, right.
And I'm hoping it's not wishful thinking, but I'm thinking we've grown weary of that. I think we're sick of being afraid. And I think there's a growing silent majority of people who are really kind of thinking at a very basic human level, I don't want to spend my days like this. I don't want to spend every ounce of energy I have ducking and weaving.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where we'll go next, but I really believe with every fiber of my professional and personal self that we won't move forward without some honest conversations about who we are when we're in fear and what we're capable of doing to each other when we're afraid.
Right. I do like, again, that idea of hope as a function of struggle. It's almost like, it would be counterintuitive, counterculturally to say we need to struggle with this honestly, vulnerably, to cultivate the hope that we need to figure out what's next.
And I see it happening. I see some movement, and I think
Yeah, I do too.
I feel hopeful for it, about it. I feel like I always think about things in terms of family. When I think about systems and organizations, and this is probably a function of my social work training to always think about systems. But I think about families, I think about schools, I think about organizations, I think about community. I think we're awakening maybe from a period of deep disengagement.
Mm-hmm.
And
we're also sick of being disengaged.
And we're sick of being disengaged. I think we are. I think it's, hey, not caring and choosing to live disappointed because that's easier than feeling disappointment has not paid off.
Something else that runs through your work that I have to say it just so matches up in such a beautiful way with a question that I've asked myself over time about, the way I've asked the question, which is a very kindred question to yours, is what are the qualities of, the genius in the art of living? It's kind of a phrase of Einstein, spiritual genius. Wholehearted lives would be another way to say it. It's not just that the things that go wrong for us are part of our wholeness, right? As you described, the vulnerability is what keeps us in. But also that what goes wrong for us is part of our gift to the world. It's what enables us to connect and be compassionate. And that's a lovely way to think about, the hard, possibly excruciating upside of the fact that so many of us are struggling and suffering right now.
I agree 100%. And I think it points to maybe one of the deepest paradoxes about vulnerability, which is, when I meet you, vulnerability is the very first thing I try to find in you. And it's the very last thing I want to show you in me. Because it's the glue that holds connection together. It's all about our common humanity. And when we own our stories and we share our stories with one another and we see ourselves reflected back in the stories of people in our lives, we know we're not alone. And to me, that's the heart of wholeheartedness. It's the center of spirituality. To me, that's the nature of connection. To be able to see myself and hear myself and learn more about myself in the stories you tell about your experiences.
I also see an upside of aging is that when I see people aging badly in a sad way, it seems to me that the common denominator is they have not faced their demons and they just get smaller. It's like they just get eaten alive from the inside. And that's about being vulnerable and, claiming what's gone wrong and the imperfection. But there's a way in which getting older, especially kind of getting into your 40s, it kind of pushes you to finally do this if you haven't done it. And that's in your story. And I just wonder if you think that this is something we can lean into almost as a gift.
No, I think what you're describing is what I have found is a very critical developmental milestone for us. Some people call it the midlife crisis. I call it the midlife unraveling.
Yeah.
I think there is a place and time in our lives where we realize that growing up, when we felt pain, when we felt small, when we felt unseen, we constructed walls and moats and we protected ourselves and we shut down parts of ourselves. And then I think this happens in midlife where we realize, oh God, to be the person we want to be the partner, to be the parent, we have to take down everything we put up that was supposed to be keeping us safe.
And that has not served us.
And it has not served us.
Right. What do you say? You say if you shut down vulnerability, you shut down all these other qualities that you long to have, right?
Right. Because, vulnerability is the center of things like
you shut
fear.
Down joy. You minimize joy.
And when you describe those people who, don't seem to be aging well, I think knowingly or unknowingly, and probably more so unknowingly, they get to that place where they say, I have to make a choice whether to pull all this stuff down and be seen or keep going with all this up. And I think they keep going carrying all this. And I think it is just so heavy.
Yeah. And do you think that we have an intuition for this? I mean, is there any advice you can give? Let me say this. When I look at your story, okay, from the outside, it seems to me that you were completely shocked that day at the red kitchen table when you discovered
I was.
vulnerability, right? Yeah. But on the other hand, if I look at it from this privileged removed perspective, it seems to me almost like you were heading towards it like a heat-seeking missile, you know? Like you didn't want to go there, but you found exactly the way in your research, which was a departure from the other research that took you there.
Right.
And you got there at a moment in your life when you realized you had, it was a stark choice. I mean, do you think that is your experience that maybe we all are kind of on that trajectory whether we want to be or not? And, how can we listen to that impulse, or how can we follow it? What can we cultivate to get there gracefully as possible?
I think grace will have a lot to do with it. I don't think gracefully will be a part of it,
okay.
Unfortunately. At least I don't see many people do it. I'm sure some people do it gracefully, not anyone I know. But I think it's the long walk from what will people think to I am enough. I think it is recognizing that if courage is a value that we hold as important, that vulnerability is the only way in and through. It starts by an openness to seeing ourselves and seeing kind of how we're protecting ourselves from vulnerability. Mm-hmm. I think that's where it started. I think for me at that red kitchen table, even for me today, I am the most successful doing, this work and trying to be real and transparent and me and feel good in my own skin when I stay very aware of what kind of armor I'm throwing up or when I feel afraid. I think maybe the definitive piece of knowing that has helped me with this is that I was raised in a very kind of binary culture. If things were good or bad, you were brave or you were afraid. You were courageous or you were fearful. And I think for me, one of the definitive moments in my life was realizing that most of us are brave and afraid in the exact same moment all day long.
Okay.